All right. I can hear you pounding the keys like a true journalist. I love it.
Just letting the
The,
people know.
the sweet music of Matthew Fairburn at work.
What the
It's
people
a
come to see.
it's a beautiful thing. All right, I'm going to close and welcome everyone to post-game wrap here. Sabres' third preseason game in the books. Buffalo Sabres losing tonight in Kraft Hockeyville to the Toronto Maple Leafs by a score of 5-2. Jeremy Davies and Henry Yokiharju, your goal scorers tonight for the Sabres. UPL stopping 25 of 28, playing 40 minutes before he was relieved by Michael Hauser, who came in the third period, stopped 11 of 13 shots. Matthew, not the greatest preseason performance that we've seen over the years from the Buffalo Sabres. But yet I don't think it's one that you're going to burn the tape on. I think there's some things to learn. It was a young lineup, by the way. I think it's worth pointing out, and I wrote this down. The Sabres had 7 NHL players in the lineup tonight. That was Bryson, Power, and Yokiharju on the back end. Cousins, Krebs, Yost, Jost, and Olofsson up top on the forward ranks. Younger lineup, but I guess I'll just throw it to you for some immediate takeaways, at least on tonight's game, because I know there's some things that we can talk about now as the Sabres are through 3 preseason games here, a little over, well, almost half the schedule. I guess they have a couple more to go. Thoughts tonight, Matthew, on what you saw at a high level?
Yeah, like you said, I feel like the best way to take in these preseason games is as, kind of a collective. You start to build on each other along with the practices that we've gotten to see, the scrimmage on Saturday. You're starting to build a little bit of a body of work and seeing some of these younger players in different situations. So you don't want to go too crazy, but this is the Sabres and this is the internet. So people are going to go a little bit crazy, right? I mean, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's first action of the preseason, this was not an ideal spot for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, I feel like. And that's probably partly by design. You want to see him in some of these situations. But like you said, a bit of a young lineup, some experience on the back end, though. I mean, it's worth noting that Devin Levi didn't have a ton of experience on the back end the other night either. He had, Dahlin and Samuelsson, but this is similar to the lineups that they've used. Some funky goals on UPL. There was the breakaway. There was the weird one from the point that hit him. And you're playing in this weird rink, this different atmosphere, a lot of visiting fans. So you don't want to draw too much, but I do think if you were somebody who came into the preseason worried about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, you're not going to bed any less worried tonight, I guess.
And I think that's what's important that's the conversation I think that's worth having right now coming out of the game tonight, besides Ryan Johnson. And you know that I'm going to push the Ryan Johnson agenda at some point tonight. But no, I think that first goal, and I had texted you during the game just saying, man, I don't know if that was tipped or not, but that's not a goal that you can let in. Like when I look at goaltenders, okay, I'm not going to talk about the breakaways for a second because I thought that he was hung out to dry on the Lafferty goal when Owen Power kind of took himself out of the play. Matthew Nyes comes in, feeds Lafferty. Lafferty made a nice move. Do you want Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to make that save? Yes. I'm not going to talk about the Max Domi goal where he comes out of the penalty box. And, that was a couple too many passes. That was, I think, Jost, Kizikov, and Rusek up front passing up an opportunity to get a shot on goal. Play transitions back the other way. Domi's right there, comes in and beats him short side. But that first goal, the immediate thing that stood out to me on that goal, that's a save that he has to make. He looked unsure of himself. The difference between a number one goaltender, a backup, and maybe like a journeyman guy, it's the types of goals that you let in. And that's a goal that a number one and maybe like even a solid number two, you can't really have get past you. I've been a defender of Luukkonen and encouraging fans to the best of my ability to be patient with him and that he's still the same prospect that's been a high performer on the international junior stage and in the Ontario League. But sooner or later, those goals have to stop. And I don't know what happened on that goal. I mean, we don't have the benefit, I guess, of, we saw a replay. I don't think that puck was tipped. Do you think that was tipped? I think it was a clear shot. I mean, the defenseman got credit for the goal there. That was
It
a Connor
looked
Timmins
pretty
goal.
clean. If anything, it got slightly redirected, but it looked pretty clean to me. And like you said, it's tough. I have also been accused of being an Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen apologist at times in my short time on the Sabres beat. But
Matt,
I'm
is it
really
out of necessity? Is it out of necessity? Just
a
because there
little bit
hasn't been, right? Yeah. Okay.
and I think I'm really actually curious to get your perspective on him because we haven't talked of all the hockey we've talked off the air. We haven't talked a ton about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and I find him to be a really interesting case of goaltending development because
Mhm.
of the weird journey that he's taken with injuries, turnover in the front office for the Sabres. And then I'm it's such a psychological position. You come from a family of goalies and what goes on between the ears is such a big deal. And what a weird year for him last year to come into training camp. I thought Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen was one of the two best goalies in the preseason last year for the Sabres, but he didn't get a spot, and it's understandable why he didn't get a spot. Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie were kind of, picked beforehand, but to have the summer that he had, come in, play the way he did, and then think, man, I felt like I earned a spot and I didn't get one. Goes down to Rochester, gets an opportunity anyways, and then they do make room for him because they don't have a choice, right? He played so well.
Yeah.
And then it's an uneven year, but it's also his first full year in the NHL. He had some really good moments. He had some tougher ones. And then by the end of the year, he's sitting on the bench and watching the prized prospect steal the show. And that's life in the NHL, but it's also, you could tell he went into the summer not super thrilled about not being on the ice, for the last couple weeks of the season and kind of wondering where he stood. So I guess in the context of all that, you'd want a more emphatic first showing, right? Especially when Devin Levi played pretty well the other night. And I don't know, it's been an interesting journey for UPL, and I feel like they need him quite a bit this year. So you just want him to be feeling good about his game going into the year.
I think a couple thoughts on what you just said. I think number one, I think, the best attribute for a goaltender isn't always physical. It's the best asset is above the neck for a goaltender, and it's being mentally consistent. And by the way, it needs to be pointed out that Luukkonen did make some good saves tonight.
Made
We're
quite a
talking,
few.
yeah, he made quite a few. Okay. So I'm talking about just one goal that can't let in. And it kind of goes to another point about Luukkonen is that you usually know within the first 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes of the game how it's going to go for him that night. And tonight, he let a goal in 7:41 in the first period. It wasn't exactly 4 or 5 minutes, but that was, he did rebound from it. But overall, also to your comment, though, I don't want to skip this also. Even with regime changes, coaching changes, he's had the same goaltending development coach the whole way through since he's been drafted. That relationship with Seamus Kotick has been steady. The good thing that I like hearing about Luukkonen is that he makes it easy for the coaches to work with them. He's very receptive to coaching, but a lot of times, like what the goals that I find him letting in is it's puck tracking, and that's what I texted you tonight. Like I don't know if he tracked that puck all the way into his blocker. It looked like he did, and he certainly looked at his blocker after the goal went past him. But did he track it all the way into his body? Now, talk about the mental part of it and the mental consistency with goaltending. That's the separator between Devin Levi right now and UPL. Like, I think the goaltending competition, the answer's already been clear,
Yeah.
right? Levi's your one. He's going to make the leap from Northeastern to the NHL. He's going to bypass the AHL. I'm not giving up on Luukkonen, but you got to throw him back out there quickly and get a good start out of him from the get-go. He did not play poorly all the way from start to finish, but that goal, I'm focused on that goal because I just didn't like it, and it can't happen. And it's going to be the one thing that we walk away from, even though he made some good saves tonight. So that's going to be the storyline for the rest of camp. Where do you see the goaltending situation right now through 3 games. I mean, we saw Devin Levi make 19 saves in the second game. We saw Eric Comrie perform, I thought, pretty well. A couple juicy rebounds in Washington. And then tonight, actually, Luukkonen, I thought to his credit tonight again, he made some good saves and his rebounds weren't bad. Again, I'm talking about 1 goal. I'm not going to beat him up for the breakaways.
And that goal happening, somewhat early, and for him to settle in, I think, again, it's preseason, but I think you have to understand and put into context the pressure that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is feeling, even in a preseason game, right? Like,
Yeah.
to let up that goal and to then be able to come back and settle into a decent game, I think was a nice rebound from him to be able to know that he's not going to let it unravel on him, especially in the preseason against not a full Leafs lineup. But the goalie situation as a whole, I find really interesting because, yes, I'm with you. It seems pretty clear from everything that they've said and just from the way that he's played that Devin Levi will get a shot to be that number 1, that main option. But man, you're taking a bit of a leap. I mean, you've been doing this a long time, tracking these prospects. You don't see a lot of goalies do what Devin Levi is about to do, like jump from college to the NHL without any AHL time.
Yeah.
Some of the best goalies in the league that have come from college didn't do it. And so I only say that, I don't say that to suggest that Devin Levi can't do it. I say that to suggest Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Eric Comrie are pretty important to the success of this team because you need to have some options for, if things aren't, if you need to have 2 goalies at least that can play for you. Like,
yes.
Maybe it's not all 3 on the roster, but you need another option besides Devin Levi. Not even if he's playing well, you need somebody to spell him. You need somebody to keep him fresh.
You say it right there, though. So do you, knowing where they're at, they have 8D right now that they could theoretically go to market with on opening night. You have the Zach Benson situation at forward. Do you go in to opening night with 3 goaltenders? I mean, that's going to be, and you don't have to answer that, I guess, unless you have a thought on it. But I mean, you see where I'm going with this, right? Like if you're not certain on that second and third, do you keep the second and third both on the roster, or do you roll the dice and do you send one down knowing that you have Dustin Tokarski there as a guy who's played NHL minutes that's going to be in Rochester, where in case you lose Comrie to waivers, right, you still have Tokarski. Like, do you roll the dice to create maybe all these things that I talk about, the extra defenseman that you possibly have, the Zach Benson situation, like they're all interconnected. There's only so many roster spots. Do you keep 3?
You have to, that's going to be one of the biggest roster questions, I think, when it comes down to it, because almost you want one of them to really grab hold of the job. But actually, when it comes to a roster construction and saving space situation, you want Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to grab hold of the job because you're going to have a harder time getting him through waivers, right? He's still young. He's got all this potential. That's going to be trickier than getting Comrie through waivers. But even Comrie, this is a league where guys like that, teams need goaltending. The Sabres aren't the only team that have, issues with backup goalies. So yeah, it's almost like the less confident you are, the more you'd want to keep the 3. But I guess then it depends on how do the other guys play, right? How does Tokarski play to the point where you maybe feel, is there not enough separation between him and Comrie to where you feel it's a huge risk losing Comrie? And like you said, it all weaves together with, does Zach Benson earn a spot? Because if Zach Benson earns a spot, that's a little bit of a pain in the butt. A good problem to have, but it creates, some trickle down decisions elsewhere. But I don't have a problem with it because if Zach Benson earns a spot, that's great. Like,
Can he help you win games? Right. I mean, that's what it's
Exactly.
going to boil down to. And and we don't know the answer to that question yet. You want to see more, he's going to get at least a couple more games here, I think, in the preseason, including maybe tomorrow when the Sabres are in Pittsburgh. But the Benson thing, I think, is kind of fun because they're almost giving you clues the way that they're using him. putting him on that line with Tage Thompson, getting him the power play time that he's getting. And by the way, he's making the most of the time that he's getting. And meanwhile, I think his competition, and we mentioned this in text, we didn't have the benefit of natural stat trick tonight, right? So we couldn't see those numbers. But, if you look at some of the guys that maybe Zach Benson's competing with for that last spot, Kulich hasn't been setting the world on fire at 5-on-5. Isak Rosén hasn't been. I think Lucas Rusek was actually pretty good tonight. But if no one else jumps up and Benson keeps going, I think he's going to stick around at least, into that first couple of weeks of the NHL season. If he keeps playing at the work and displaying the work rate that he's done through, at least if he repeats the performance that he had last night. He was great last night, I thought. Battling, competitive, stripping pucks, not the power play assist. I mean, that was a nice play, but everything else that he did, he was right there for a smaller guy who's not the fastest guy. He's just a gamer. So it goes back to that question, can he help you win games? And I think the answer is right now, probably. So that's an interesting storyline, I think, for me. Just the confidence that kid's playing with already. He's exceeding expectations. We knew he was good. I don't think anyone knew he was this good right away. But again, do you want to overreact to a preseason game? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
You try to keep your highs low and your lows high.
Well, what stood out to me, and I probably always have you in the back of my brain when I'm thinking about these prospects and thinking about, being measured, being patient, not getting people too ahead of themselves. But what has stood out to me, in addition to how he's playing, because I do think he brings something. I think people can get easily caught up in, oh, well, Kulich is ahead of him in line. But that's not really how it works, right? Like it's about putting together a roster that's going to help you win games. And Zach Benson he does different things well that may speed up his timeline. It doesn't mean he's a better player than Yuri Kulich or Matt Savoy or whoever. It just means that his game is translating quicker and that he's going to fit in quicker and find a role quicker. And it very well may be that long term it makes him a better player, but everybody's path is different and everybody's timeline is different. But in addition to how he's playing and how he fits in, Don Granato has not poured any cold water on this at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that interesting because I think Don Granato is a pretty transparent guy. He's a very realistic guy and willing to put things in perspective and temper expectations when necessary, or cool down criticism when he feels, it's getting out of control. But when he's asked about Zach Benson, it's not, the first thing out of his mouth isn't, hey, it's just the first week of training camp. He's immediately bringing up stuff that he even mentioned the other night. He's like, I was not expecting this. Like, I was not expecting him basically to be able to strip pucks from guys 30 pounds heavier than him. And
I was not expecting this either. Like, knowing as good as he is, I'm kind of.
You don't know until you see it, right?
Yeah.
You only see him in the WHL. You don't know what he's going to look like against. But the fact that it translates this well. And the other day, Don Granato was asked, Joe Yerdon asked him, essentially, what does a guy like that have to do to stick around? And he, couched it by saying, it's the first week. I get it. I'm not trying to, go too crazy here, but Don Granato mentioned strength and size are the two big things you're worried about with an 18-year-old. But then he went on to say, that's not a problem because this guy is playing a strong game. He's handling the jump up in size and physicality. The thing you mentioned that I think is important is, how does he look a week from now? 2 weeks from now.
Does the buzz wear off? Because
he's riding adrenaline, right?
Yes,
like,
that's right.
He's fired up to be in his first NHL camp. He's playing next to Tage Thompson and Jeff Skinner. He's in this building for the first time, wearing that NHL jersey. Does that wear off? Does he fade a little bit? Because the big challenge, I think, for a kid that's 18 years old playing in the NHL, and a few guys seem to do it every year, but it's holding up over the course of the season. I was actually talking to Jeff Skinner the other day about it because he did, make the jump. And that's what he mentioned was that, off the ice is what was tough for him. Being that away from home and figuring out how to be an adult and figuring out how to take care of your body and all these things that nobody sees, right? Nobody's seeing that on their TV screen each night, but that's a huge part of handling an 82 game season in the NHL. And I think, you know, you have a guy like Devin Levi who's going to have to do some of that for the first time, but everybody knows the preparation and the habits that he's built. And in Zach Benson's case, it's not that he can't do it, but that's one of the questions. Is he riding adrenaline right now where he's going to fade? But you don't want to overreact to him having a bad game either. Like Don Granato's been patient, letting guys come in and out of the lineup last year with Peterka and Quinn. And so there's a balancing act that needs to happen. But right now he looks like somebody who can help them win. And I think that's the biggest deal is this is not a development year. So if he can help you win, the nice feelings go out the way. It might even benefit Yuri Kulik and Isak Rosen to, be like, man, this guy's coming. Like it might fire guys up, and that's the competition you want to create when you have such a deep prospect pool.
Well, so I think with all that said, like, I don't know if I had to make the decision today, I'm probably not keeping him. I just don't, because I think that you have other guys. You have to kind of clear some things out, and I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough decision. I find myself trying to, I'm asking myself, am I overreacting? Because he has been that good. Um, he's so smart. He's getting by on his hockey intelligence, and I guess I don't want to overreact right now. You know what I mean? Like in my mind, coming into camp, it's like he's going to come in. They're going to get him some preseason games, maybe give him a couple NHL games. But do I see him here? You know, after the World Juniors, do I see him here? I don't. I don't see him here, and that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm not saying he's not going to get any games to start the season. I think he very well could, especially the way that, that things are going right now. Like he's going to have to get an extended look, but I don't worry about that kid also going back to the WHL and developing bad habits and not taking care of his body, not getting proper sleep, things like that. We don't have to answer that question right now.
Does the situation in Wenatchee worry you at all? It's got a
Not
fact,
really.
like maybe a little bit, it creeps into the Sabres heads, but I mean, like you said, this is a kid who habits and things like that aren't going to be a problem. It's probably not ideal, what's going on with their coach right now, but
Yeah.
you'd rather be sending him back to James Patrick, but I mean, you
I
got to
think
make the decision you got to make.
it's a factor. It's a factor. I think Kevin Adams and Don Granato will talk about that. But I mean, they also have a pretty good group of players there. Not that, a bunch of 19-year-olds are like that mature, that they can kind of run the ship and keep it steady. But they do have a good group there where, if he was the only guy in a young team, you'd worry more about it. But no, that's a whole other wrinkle that it's a factor. I don't know how much of a factor it is. But needless to say, I mean, I'm really curious to see what Benson does the rest of the way. Because, and that's the other thing. No one really, like, if you get back to tonight's game, no one really stood out and jumped out of, the ice and said, wow, I thought Rusek played a good game. He's not a guy that maybe we talk about enough as a candidate to make that opening night roster. Brandon Byro had a good game last night in spots. He had some trickier moments. But again, he's maybe a guy at 25 years old. Is he ready? A guy that Granato has even mentioned that they thought about calling up last year in spots before injuries kind of crept into the picture. But no one really jumped out tonight. And again, that kind of keeps the whole Benson thing elevated. You know what I mean? But speaking of elevated, not to do a hard shift in gears, unless you had other things on Benson, I got to talk about Ryan Johnson. He had 4 shots on goal tonight of the Sabres 15. The Sabres were outshot 41-15 tonight. Now I know, Owen Power was -3, Johnson was -2, right? Like those weren't directly correlated to, like, Johnson being a -2. They were not really correlated to anything that he did on the ice. And the game that he's playing, I just think right now we talk about Benson exceeding expectations. Ryan Johnson is coming right in, a very polished product, and he looks like the perfect defenseman for this system. that they want to play based on mobility. He's jumping up. He's smart about when he jumps up. And defensively, I think he's doing a really good job. I haven't seen too many plays. Like he got caught. He came in, I think it was the third goal tonight. I have it written down. It was one of the goals here. Maybe it was the opening. It was the fourth goal, the Clifford goal, where Johnson goes off the boards. He tried to clear it off the boards, and there was no support from the forwards coming back. So that's where Connor Timmins scarfed up the puck, and Johnson got caught flat-footed, goes around him and sets up. I forget who that was. It was Kyle Clifford. I'm not really going to fault Johnson on that play, but that's like the negative play that stood out to me tonight amongst these very good plays. Again, his second appearance in the preseason, and I thought he may have played better tonight. I don't know. Where do you think Johnson is right now? Is he putting heat on Bryson, Stillman? Kind of like we talk about maybe Benson or some of these other guys putting heat on the other guys in the lineup to make a case for himself here.
It's tough to put heat on those guys when there's such a log jam up there already, right? Like there's not a lot of minutes to go around, but you will put heat on those guys very quickly if there's an injury or two,
Yep.
right? I think that's where it comes in. I think these guys probably know the contract situations and all those little things that sort of insulate some guys from true roster competition, but it'll get heated quick, especially if he gets a little bit of time in the AHL and keeps building. Like he has gotten more impressive, watching him in the Frozen Four. It goes to show you, I think you mentioned his fit in this system, and some guys, their game will translate to a certain system. Some guys' game will translate better to pro hockey and being in a certain role than, the role that Ryan Johnson played at Minnesota, where he wasn't really asked to stand out, right? Like that wasn't really the spot that he was in. I think that kind of benefited him coming here and having, we all know the type of skater he is, and the way he skates to get out of trouble in the defensive zone is what is standing out to me. The way he's breaking pucks out, he can certainly create zone entries, and that's a massive part of the Sabres game. So all of a sudden, this looks like a guy that, maybe not this year, maybe at some point this year, but I think in an ideal world, they don't want him this year because that would mean injuries happened somewhere along the line. But this guy looks like he could fit in, and in a pipeline that needed defensive prospects to kind of step up, and they weren't even sure if, he was going to sign the whole deal. This has been the pleasant surprise of the last few months for me, because at development camp, it's really hard to tell, right? You're playing a 3-on-3 scrimmage. Yeah. You're seeing some practices, and it's like, yeah, this guy can really skate. Like, but get him in the rookie tournament. You get him in this setting. This setting probably more than any other is where, like, okay, you look like a really good skater at development camp. Then you see him out here, and it's like, oh, that's helping him make plays against legit players, and that's I think really exciting. Seth Appert's got to be pretty excited leaving this camp. When he starts to put his roster together, he's going to have a pretty fun group.
You talk about the skating, and a lot of times when we talk about the skating and the contribution that player makes to the game, leveraging that skill, we always talk about it maybe carrying the puck or breaking it out of the zone. There was a play tonight early in the second period. Puck gets dumped out of Toronto's end, and it goes back towards Buffalo's blue line. It was a 50-50 puck. Johnson goes back. He has a guy on his ass, wins the puck battle, and it kind of in one motion curls, identifies, sticks his head up, and makes a pass, and quickly gets the puck going back. So not only did he win the 50-50, makes a solid retrieval, but again, it was a play that got them to play fast in transition. He did everything that the Sabres want to do in 3 seconds, not even, but we're talking about Johnson, and I posed the question to you about, does he create heat? I think there's nothing wrong if a player exceeds expectations in preseason and still goes down to continue building his resume. And that's important too. You can create heat on the big club, to your point, by excelling in Rochester and kind of waiting, keeping your position on the pecking order, or maybe even bettering your position, and injuries will happen. But to your point, I agree with you. He's been a pleasant surprise. I'm kind of curious, kind of like what we talk about with Benson, to see where his game goes. But I think it's different. Like, you're kind of waiting for the buzz to wear off with Benson. I think that what you're seeing with Ryan Johnson is that natural progression of a guy that spent 4 years in school, and he's mature, and this is his game. This is who he is. And when you need him to play in the NHL, it's really comforting knowing that you have a guy that's in Rochester, because I think that's where he's going to be. There's just numbers ahead of him that they need to sort out, that they can come up and he can play 12, 13, 14 minutes a game. And I think that that's really important for the system. To your point, all of a sudden they have depth. Maybe at the trade deadline, they don't have to go out and burn a prospect to go add a Riley Stillman this year, knowing that they have a couple guys, not just Ryan Johnson, kind of waiting to fill a gap. So that was really good to see. So again, for everyone just joining us, Sabres fall 5-2 tonight in Kraft Hockeyville. Outshot 41-15. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen with 25 of 28 saves. I guess you could see it on the ticker. I forgot that I have the ticker up, but Jeremy Davies with first period goal. Yeah, look at that. I kind of, I try to set it up. And Henry Yokiharju, by the way, that goal, let's talk about the Yokiharju goal.
Glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Now, okay, so I'll ask you, what stood out to you on that goal, or why were you glad that I brought that up? Because I have a thought on that goal, and maybe we're aligned here.
A thought, big picture on Henry Yokiharju. Like, for him, I liked seeing him get that goal because the year that he had last year, this is another guy that, I don't know, I guess I'll be an apologist for, because I see a young player who had a lot of opportunity last season and had to fight through a really tough year with the injury that he had early on in the season, taking that, that face injury that becomes kind of a thing that clouds your head. And, then he's fighting to get back on the ice. He's playing through various things throughout the year, just never seemed quite right. And a lot of that stuff tends to just fall beneath the surface, it seems like, especially in hockey. There's not really an injury report like there is in football. And so you don't really see complete transparency what everybody's dealing with. But that guy was dealing with a lot last year, and he was in a role that maybe was too much, but I don't even know if we can say that because of everything that he was fighting through. So I liked him being able to get a shot through from the point. Like, that was an issue for this team last year. And to have it go in, like, I was talking to him the other day, and it just feels like he's in a much better place. He doesn't have the tinted visor anymore, which he had after the injury, which I think had something to do with, that, he's still got the scar a little bit, right? Under his eye, but I don't know. It's just a lot that he went through. And that's a nice player to, if they, they showed some confidence in him, I think, this off season. They did go out and add 2 right shots, but that almost makes Yokiharju's life a little bit easier, right? They traded Ilya Lyubushkin. They did not trade Henry Yokiharju, who probably had more value. So that was encouraging, I think, a nice little confidence boost for him. But I'm curious what you think about him, because I still feel like he falls on the fringe of the age that you would still consider a prospect for a defenseman if he didn't have so many, games. Obviously, he's not a prospect, but he's a young player. He's still a developing guy that's still growing into his game. And, man, would it be nice for them if he, stepped his game up this year.
No, he's always been, I think, serviceable. Has he been perfect? No, he's had good moments, like a lot of players over the past couple of years. He's had some tougher runs, and you just kind of capsulized it, I think, pretty well. It sounds like, and you're down there pretty much every day at the rink. He's been skating with power, right?
Yes.
For the most part. So, I guess that's the question. Do we expect that to be a pair going into the season? Seems like it might be. I was kind of curious coming in how they were going to redeploy Yokiharju this year. And I guess, again, it's one game tonight. We'll see what happens moving forward here. He's clearly on the roster. I don't think he's in that cluster of guys that they're sorting through. But the play that, it was a nice shot, by the way. That was a nice release of the puck from distance. It was a good, I think it went bar down, nice shot. But the play I thought that made that goal possible was Rusek on the wall, winning that battle, and just a simple pass back. Such a small play, but that's what I wrote down on that goal. I was like, Rusek wins a battle on the left boards and kicks it out high, and it was just a nice shot, nice play, simple hockey. You see it all the time. Win a board battle, kick it up high. If you can crash a net, you crash a net. Luckily, they didn't have to, because Yokiharju beat the goaltender with a really nice shot. But that was why I wanted to bring that play up. It was really about Rusek and a simple play. And I know people maybe don't get excited about that stuff. I do. I do.
He had a couple nice forechecks
He
tonight.
did. He did.
And that's what jumped out to me when he came into the lineup last year is that, again, we talk about Benson and, you talk about Kulik and Roseanne and Savoy and these guys. Some of them do have similar skill sets. What I like about Rusek is that he's different. He has a different flavor that probably the bottom six needed some of. It seemed like in the games he played last year that all of a sudden you're immediately, and of course, he's got the adrenaline and the fresh legs, I guess, of playing a debut, but still seeing him and it was like, man, this guy forechecks, like they need a little bit more of this. And I think winning those battles along the boards, like those little things, you don't need him to score 25, 30 goals. That's not what, is going to be his future in the NHL. You need him to be that kind of player. And he'll fly under the radar a lot, probably, even as an NHL player. But those are the things that help you make a team, I think, ultimately. And that's where he is very much in the mix there.
I think so too. And I think for what you described, like what he does well on the forecheck, he closes on guys really well. He's got speed. He plays hungry, plays with a purpose. The little play that I point out tonight, just kind of winning that puck and getting like a step of space and kicking it to an open man. Those are little plays that are going to help you win. But those are the types of plays that he needs to make for the role that they're going to need him to fill if they think that he can play in the NHL. So, more to come on that. But I always, I don't think that as a Sabres population that he's talked about enough. As a contender for the spot, just because there's so many exciting, young, more offensively wired prospects. But a couple of comments here to kind of get through before we close out tonight. We have one here from Neil saying, what was Kizikov thinking? Twice he had tapping goals and passed the puck. Yeah, I mean, that's a young player who's still figuring it out, and he's maybe being a little too unselfish. We saw a lot of that. Guys deferring to what they thought were open teammates at the Prospects Challenge. And it's you see that a lot with younger guys. And I don't think it's the moment's too big for them. But yeah, I mean, that was, I think one happened in the second period that actually led to a goal against, and had another opportunity late in the game where he probably actually would have scored if he would have fired that puck. So that's a good call out by Neil. Brian says the math of a 23-man roster doesn't allow for 3 goalies. I mean, it has in the past, so it still could, but 3 goalies precludes 8 defensemen. And I agree. He said they're not carrying fewer than 13 forwards. No, I agree. I think that's why the goaltending, and this is kind of what Matthew's saying as well, I think the goaltending thing is going to be really interesting, probably the most compelling storyline here for the balance of the preseason. Because again, you do have, in the event that you lose whoever you don't go to market with on opening night, you have Tokarski. I think that's something that can't be overlooked. Not that you want to rely on it, but I think they bolstered their depth for a reason. It's not all the AHL. Kulik looks like he's chasing it. I guess we're saying Kulik now, by the way, not Kulik. Kulik looks like he's chasing it. He might be trying too hard, and it's just not happening. I think he's still rounding out his game. I don't know, Matt, do you think that Jiri Kulik is kind of chasing the play? I mean, you notice him on the power play. You'll want to notice him more at 5-on-5. Do you get the vibe that he's trying too hard?
Maybe on the power play, he might be pressing because he's had all these opportunities and he knows that's his ticket, right? Like that's his path to the league. And that's what's made him the player that he is. There's probably an element. I just feel like away from the puck, there's, as you said, he's still rounding out his game. This is not an indictment on him as a player, but I think when I think about Kulik, what I wonder is how does he fit in right now? I don't have a lot of doubts about how he fits in the future and his place in the organization and that he will be a productive player at the NHL level. I just wonder how he fits in right now without that piece of his game at 5-on-5 away from the puck. It's a lot of the things that people rag on Victor Olofsson about. And the difference is Victor Olofsson is already a 28 goal scorer. And this is a year where you need to make the playoffs. And so I think that's okay. I do think Kulik, he's the type of personality where his eye was on that NHL roster spot. There's no doubt, over the summer. And you want him to feel that way. I just think for he and Roseanne both, I think it's stuck out to me because it's contrasted with Benson and
Yep.
kind of what he brings and how he fits into a winning formula that you think, okay, that's a little bit of what they're missing, and that's okay. I think there's no need to sound the alarm bells if those guys are spending some more time in Rochester.
Oh, no, I mean, Kulik's 19. He doesn't
Right.
turn 20 until April of 24. I mean, he had a great year last year. Let that be something that you build on, and it doesn't mean he has to play in the NHL this year. I think some people wanted to maybe see him really take a good run at it, and he still could. There's still time in the
Yeah, it's
preseason, but
early.
yeah, it's still early. So, just like I don't wanna again, I mean, we started the conversation tonight talking about UPL, and I don't want to overreact to one goal. And I know people want to see him stop those breakaways, and I feel he was hung out to dry. And UPL can come out and stop 28 of 28 in his next start, and then we're not having the same conversation. It's the same thing. Cooley can come out and have a 2-goal game next time he gets back at it. So, still early, no overreactions on any of these fronts. Really, it is what it is. But the idea I think tonight, Matthew, is just kind of do a quick hit and just discuss the game. Any closing thoughts from you, or did we pretty much cover all the ground that you wanted to get to tonight?
I think we hit on the big points, and I think we'll do this again. So we'll leave more meat on the bone because there's more hockey tomorrow night, more hockey on Saturday, and then Don Granato mentioned that by October 1, he kind of wants to start getting the NHL group some time to gel together, and then we might have a few more answers to like what the lines look like and the pairs and things like that. So no, but great chat. Always great chatting with you, and I think we should do some
Yeah,
more of it.
we should, and we will. And we usually do this on the golf course, but I haven't been able to drag your ass out there as much this year. But that's a whole other topic for text message and dinner.
It's much
But
needed.
yes, yeah, man. Hey, by the way, I got a RoboVac, dude. So I got to tell you, get one of those if you don't have one. I've been running that thing the past couple of days. Game changer.
In the
Game
house?
changer. Yeah, man.
We
Yeah.
have one, but our son is terrified of it, and so we have to, get him out of the fear of it so that we can start running it again. The previous owners of our house left it behind, and I was like,
Oh,
"This is great." I was like, "I've never had one of these," and I turned it on, and our son was not a fan. So we need
uh,
to. We might be ready to reintroduce it now that you've
yeah.
given me the push.
Yeah, take another run at it. You send him down to the minors, give him a recall, see if he
Right.
can hang
Yeah.
here with the RoboVac. But it's a game changer with my 2 dogs, man. But yeah, so to your point, Sabres back in action tomorrow in Pittsburgh, and then they get a day off, and I believe it's a 3:00 start
It
on
is.
Saturday. Is that right? Which is nice because I have a 7:30 dinner reservation, I believe. So thank you for that, NHL schedule makers. But no, I think that's it for us tonight. And yeah, we'll do some post-game chats throughout the season, hopefully, Matthew, if I can kind of suck you into the vortex here now that I'm trying to maximize all this equipment that I bought over the summer. So thanks for everyone for watching. Thank you, Matthew, for making time to kind of chat about the game. And we'll do it again soon.